You know that feeling. You pick up your phone just for a second, and then bam, half an hour's gone.
Oh, yeah. Happens to everyone, I think.
We've all been there. So today, we want to go a bit deeper than just, acknowledging it. We're really digging into why social media feels so magnetic.
Right. What's the science behind it? What's grabbing our attention? And what potential effects does it have on our brains, our well-being?
Exactly. We're unpacking it. And for this, we've pulled together quite a range of sources.
Yeah, we have some really solid studies from places like Nature Communications, Addictive Behavior, Psychological Science, PMC.
And also articles, right? From The Guardian, SciPost, Freedom Matters, the Journal of Public Health and Primary Care, a real mix.
A good mix. The idea is to sort of bring it all together.
Yeah, pull out the key insights for you, connect the dots. We really want you to understand the mechanisms, what the research actually suggests about social media's influence.
Okay, so where do we start? What's the initial pull, that first hook?
Well, I think it has to be the brain's reward system, doesn't it? Yeah.
Fundamentally, yes. How these platforms tap into that. Several sources really dug into how sophisticated this is.
Right. That Nature Communications study.
Mm.
Huge amount of data.
Yeah.
It showed our behavior on social media lines up perfectly with how we learn from rewards.
Yeah, basic reward lining principles. And a big piece seems to be the unpredictability.
Ah, the variable rewards thing, like a slot machine.
Exactly like that. You don't know when the next, or interesting post will appear. That surprise element, the variability, is super effective at keeping us hooked. That study really showed it.
It's that maybe the next scroll feeling.
Precisely. Keeps us going.
And it's not just the when, but the feeling we get if something good happens, right? It's like dopamine.
Yep, dopamine, that's the key neurotransmitter. SciPost, the Journal of Public Health, they both pointed to it. Likes, comments, even just cool content.
Little dopamine hits.
That's a perfect way to put it. Positive feedback, enjoyable stuff. Triggers dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens, this key reward area. Makes us feel good, makes us want to do it again.
And that's consistent across a few sources.
Yeah, SciPost, the UCLA Research, Journal of Public Health, they all converge on this point.
Which, it sounds worryingly similar to other things, potentially addictive things.
Well, the comparison comes up. SciPost and the Journal of Public Health definitely drew parallels to gambling, even substance use.
Wow. That's striking.
It is, because the underlying brain pathways, the ones involved in seeking reward, they are very similar. The anticipation, the dopamine release, it creates this really strong reinforcing loop.
And didn't SciPost mention a term for it?
Dopamining. Yeah, researchers at London South Bank University coined that, this constant sort of searching for those little dopamine hits online.
Dopamining. Okay. So our brains are basically getting trained to hunt for these digital rewards. But what happens long term? Does the brain actually, change, adapt?
It seems so, yeah, absolutely. Repeatedly activating that reward system can lead to neuroadaptations. Basically, the brain changes its structure and function based on experience. Well, as one source mentioned, the nucleus accumbens might get more active, more sensitive to these rewards. But other areas, maybe ones involved in decision-making or impulse control, they might get weaker.
So our brain kind of shifts priorities towards the quick fix, maybe, over stuff that's better long-term, but doesn't give that instant buzz.
That's a good way to think about it. SciPost talked about the brain maybe pruning connections to make those reward pathways faster, more efficient.
Faster pathways to pleasure.
Sounds good. But the flip side, according to the research, could be more impulsivity, finding it harder to just stop scrolling,
Right. And it wasn't just about efficiency, was it? I think SciPost also mentioned actual physical changes. Shrinkage.
Yeah, potential shrinkage in areas like the amygdala, which handles emotions, and the nucleus accumbens itself. Key areas for control and decision-making.
Okay, that's pretty significant. If those areas are actually changing, it could affect more than just our scrolling habits.
It could have real consequences for regulating emotions, making considered choices. Yeah, things that go way beyond the phone.
But it's not purely internal, is it? That UCLA study you mentioned, that was fascinating. How likes and what our peers think play a huge role, especially for teens.
Oh, absolutely. That study was really revealing. They found when teenagers saw their own photos getting lots of likes, bam, same reward areas lit up, nucleus accumbens again.
But the social angle was key.
Totally. And they pointed out this circuitry seems extra sensitive during adolescence.
Makes sense. That's when peer approval feels like, everything.
Exactly. And the study also showed that just seeing a photo already had lots of likes made other teens more likely to like it too, even if they didn't know the person.
Social proof online. Wow.
It really highlights how powerful those social cues are. Peer influence in action.
And you've got to imagine if that happens with strangers, the effect with actual friends must be even stronger.
Yeah, the researchers themselves suggested that. It points to how social media can really amplify those existing social dynamics, the pressure to fit in.
Okay, so I've got dopamine, brain adaptations, peer pressure. Now, what about something maybe less positive? That feeling of just endlessly scrolling through bad news, doom scrolling.
Ah, yes. Doom scrolling. Compulsively consuming negative news online. It's become, well, really common, hasn't it? And researchers are definitely looking into it.
There was even a scale developed for it.
Yeah, one of the PMC studies developed a doom scrolling scale. That alone tells you it's being taken seriously.
And what did they find? Who tends to do it more?
Well, they found links between doom scrolling and certain personality types, but also, maybe unsurprisingly, with higher social media addiction, more FOMO, fear of missing out, and just generally using social media more.
It seems like a cluster of behaviors.
Exactly. And the paradox is, even though the goal might be to stay informed, it's linked to feeling worse afterwards.
Right. Why do we do it then? It seems counterintuitive.
It really does. But the research cited in that PMC article clearly connects it with increased depression and anxiety. And their own study suggested psychological distress is kind of the middleman.
How so?
It mediates the link. So doom scrolling leads to more distress, and that distress then leads to lower well-being, less life satisfaction, worse mental well-being. It's not just a correlation, it seems to be a pathway.
So the act itself contributes to feeling worse overall, not just in the moment. Wow. Okay, you mentioned FOMO there, fear of missing out. That feels like another huge piece.
Oh, definitely. FOMO is tightly linked to problematic social media use. That PMC study highlighted it too, seeing everyone's curated highlight reels. It can really ramp up that fear that we're missing out.
It's a constant comparison engine.
And there was that addictive behavior study looking at the brain basis of FOMO.
Yes, what did that find?
They found people with higher FOMO actually had reduced cortical thickness, thinner brain tissue in parts of the posterior default mode network, or DMN. And they also had higher problematic social media use.
Okay, hold on. Reduced cortical thickness, DMN. Remind us what the DMN is again.
Right, so the default mode network, think of it as your brain's idle mode network. It's most active when you're not focused on the outside world, when you're daydreaming, reflecting, thinking about yourself, past, future, kind of your internal mental space.
Okay, so if it's thinner in people with high FOMO, what does that imply?
Well, the addictive behavior study suggests it might mean a reduced capacity for those really important internal processes. Less robust self-reflection, maybe.
So if we're always plugged into the external buzz of social media, are we sort of neglecting that internal network?
Yeah.
Potentially even hindering it?
That's the concern, yeah. The idea is that constant external stimulation, like scrolling, could disrupt the DMN's natural activity, maybe even its structure. Less mental bandwidth for introspection, planning, sense of self.
That link they found between FOMO, the thinner DMN, and problem social media use. It feels like a potential neurological consequence of being constantly on.
It really underscores that possibility. It's like we're training our brains to be constantly reactive, maybe at the cost of our inner reflective life.
Which brings us to self-esteem. How does seeing all this perfect curated stuff affect how we feel about ourselves?
Yeah, that's crucial. One source rightly pointed out that constant exposure to these often highly idealized versions of life naturally leads to upward social comparisons.
We compare our messy reality to someone else's highlight reel.
Exactly. And it's easy to forget it is a highlight reel. This can chip away at our own self-esteem, make us feel anxious about our own lives, our looks.
And there was specific research on this with teens.
Yes, that PMC study on adolescence found a clear negative link between social media addiction and self-esteem. And interestingly, body image was a key factor in that link.
A mediator, you mean?
Yeah, it wasn't just that addiction lowered self-esteem directly. It seemed to be strongly tied to negative body image, which then impacted self-worth.
So it's a cycle.
Yeah.
Addiction links to poor body image, which links to low self-esteem.
That's what the study suggested, yeah. Higher addiction predicted lower levels of both self-esteem and positive body image. A kind of negative feedback loop.
That's really sobering, especially thinking about younger people still figuring out who they are. Okay, let's circle back to the addiction aspect. Freedom Matters drew some strong parallels again.
Yes, they emphasized how things like doom scrolling can activate the exact same reward pathways nucleus accumbens again as recognized behavioral addictions. That activation fuels cravings, making it hard to stop.
And they also mentioned cognitive overload, feeling overwhelmed.
Right. The idea is that as our brains get wired for the fast-paced, quick-hit nature of scrolling, our prefrontal cortex, the thinking, planning, focusing part, might get a bit taxed, less efficient.
So we get overwhelmed more easily.
Potentially. And paradoxically, when we feel overwhelmed, the brain might seek the familiar comfort of more scrolling, even though it's part of the problem.
Like we're training ourselves for distraction, making deep focus harder. And the Journal of Public Health paper really broke down the mechanics of this scroll trap.
It did, yeah. Describe those small, unpredictable dopamine hits, the variable rewards, getting lost in that effortless flow state, all making scrolling incredibly habit-forming. They explicitly compared it to gambling mechanisms.
They use terms like ludic loops, intermittent conditioning. Sounds very intentional, design-wise.
It certainly suggests platforms are built with these psychological principles in mind to keep us engaged. And that journal also raised another important point.
Which was?
How this kind of mindless, automatic scrolling through news can make us more vulnerable to partisan bias and misinformation.
Because we're not really thinking critically, just absorbing whatever flows past, reinforcing what we already believe.
Exactly. Passive absorption rather than active engagement. And that final thought from one of the sources really tied it together.
The one about attention.
Yeah, that in a world designed to grab our attention, choosing where we direct it is basically an act of self-respect, reclaiming it.
It really makes you think, okay, wow. Summing up, it feels like social media's power over our attention is no accident.
Yeah.
It taps deep into our brain's reward wiring, and the platforms are, well, engineered to exploit that. And this can actually lead to changes in our brains over time, more impulsivity, difficulty disengaging, plus clear links to mood issues, self-esteem problems, even hurting our ability to focus.
That's a great summary. And honestly, just understanding these mechanisms, that's the first step, isn't it? It gives you, the listener, a bit more power, a more conscious perspective on your own habits.
So knowing all this, what's next? What can people do with this information?
Well, I think exploring digital well-being practices could be really helpful. There's growing research on mindful technology use, ways to build a healthier relationship with these tools.
So being more intentional, maybe. Setting boundaries, not just letting the apps dictate our time and attention.
Exactly. Being more deliberate. Which really leads to the big question, I think. How can we consciously reshape our relationship with technology? How do we make sure it serves our well-being, lets us reclaim our attention in this incredibly noisy digital world?
That's definitely something to chew on. How do we use these tools without letting them use us?
That's the challenge, isn't it? A really important one for all of us moving forward.
Thanks for tuning into the Intraspective. We hope this episode gave you something to think about, or maybe even helped you feel a little less alone. We would love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you? What topics should we explore next? Drop us a comment, send a message, or just reflect quietly, whatever suits your style. And if you found this episode meaningful, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need it. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep going inward. You have been listening to The Intraspective.